Did Caligula make his horse a consul?
Do you think it's worth us mentioning Honorius?
Oh, yeah, because he's crap. Did Nero kill his own wife? Renamed everything after himself. I can see where this is going. Hi, I'm Dr. Simon Elliot, archaeologist, historian and broadcaster. Today I'm going to be answering Google's most popular questions about who were the worst Roman emperors. Many people have heard of people like Caligula, they've heard of Nero, they may have seen Commodus in the movie Gladiator.
What could be more glorious than to challenge the emperor himself in the great arena?
But we're going to consider a lot more today as well, and let's go straight in. So what's the first question? Was Tiberius a bad emperor? Every Roman emperor lived in the shadow of the first emperor Augustus, and Tiberius was the first, and it's his job to cement the Julio-Claudian dynasty in place. In doing that, he did a pretty good job. If you look at the narrative of Tiberius in terms of military leader, he was highly successful. We're seeing the story of all of these individuals, in this case Tiberius, through contemporary history, when the historians are writing for a certain audience. They're trying to colour the forebears of their own emperors in a bad light. So I think actually Tiberius gets a bad press. Next question. Why did Tiberius leave Rome? I think this is a question about Capri, where Tiberius had what is described by the contemporary historians as a pleasure palace. It was not unusual for Roman emperors to have their own palaces, their own country villas, outside of imperial Rome, and many Roman emperors chose not to be in Rome all the time because it was a really hard job being nice to senators or keeping the military happy or keeping the people of Rome happy all the time. You don't want to be in the public light all the time. So with Tiberius spending part of his time in his own sort of palace on the Bay of Naples in Capri, absolutely totally normal. Next question. Did Tiberius have sexual relations with underage boys? There's no evidence of it apart from the salacious writings of contemporary authors, because they're trying to big up the emperors in the age in which they're writing. Next question. We're on to Caligula. Caligula is often portrayed as being one of the worst Roman emperors. It's worth remembering that we're seeing it through the PR lens of later Roman writers who are writing about the Julio-Claudians. And also in our world today, we see Caligula's story through the light of Robert Graves, I, Claudius, and then famously the very high quality BBC television production.
By my orders, the Furies nightly avenge your dear ones while he sleeps.
Did Caligula enjoy executing people? If you were to believe the contemporary historians, then yes, but in reality he was probably no better or worse than anybody else who has total power.
If only all Rome had just one neck.
A Roman emperor has total power, but Caligula is no worse in that sense than any other Roman emperor. Did Caligula kill Tiberius? This is all about PR. No evidence of it whatsoever. Next question. Did Caligula have sexual relations with his sisters?
And whereas Jove only slept with one of his sisters, I slept with all three of mine.
Do I believe the contemporary historians? In this case, probably not. Did Caligula build a bridge over the Bay of Naples? Remember, the Bay of Naples is one of the super rich regions of Roman Italy. You may have working ports like Pompeii, but also you've got super rich villas around there as well. Tiberius has his own palace on Capri. If he did, it would have been a bridge of boats, with ships lashed together with a walkway across them in exactly the same way as Trajan built a bridge of boats to cross the Danube when he invaded Dacia. Do I believe Caligula built a bridge of boats across the Bay of Naples? No. Next question. Did Caligula make his horse a consul? Well, a consul was one of the two senior magistrates running Rome in any given year, the senators. So that's the very, very top of Roman society, just immediately below the emperor.
Senators, a gift for you on the Feast of Augustus. Allow me to introduce Insultatus, a new senator of Rome.
Did Caligula want to make his favourite horse, Titus, a consul? Almost certainly no. Next question. Did Caligula start a war against Neptune? This is all about Britain. Caligula actually planned to invade Britain in AD 40, which is a really big deal because the Romans were only just becoming aware of what really was going on in Britain.
Why, surely not suggesting that a rabble of Scots could get the better of Roman soldiers.
us!
Welcome, General. Splendid.
Britain was a fantastical place that was really scary to invade. Crossing Oceanus, which is the way the Romans describe any sea outside Mare Nostrum in the Mediterranean. So you're crossing a sea which is outside the Roman world to a territory which is across the sea outside the Roman world. Truly scary for the Romans. Caligula, not a popular emperor, decides that he's going to try and conquer Britain because that'll make his name as a military leader. He builds a fleet which later becomes the Classis Britannica regional fleet of Britain. He gathers the legions and fills the warehouses with goods to be able to facilitate a full-scale invasion of Britain, AD 40. But then his troops refuse to get on the ships because it's so scary, and probably because they don't like him very much.
Show them our booty! Show them the plunder we gathered from old Neptune!
So he therefore orders them to march up and down the beaches of northwestern Gaul, gathering seashells in their helmets. He leads his troops with the seashells in helmets through the Forum Romanum, everybody applauding the emperor's victory over the sea. He's conquered Oceanus. This is a classic Roman conceit. He's covering up the fact that actually he's completely failed in the endeavour to invade Britain. Even though Caligula didn't invade, all the planning he'd done allowed the Romans to invade 3 years later. Sadly for him, though, he'd been assassinated. Next question. Did Caligula think he was a god? You've got to bear in mind that you're the most powerful person in a vast empire, which is humming along very nicely. You're at the top of society. No one's going to argue with you. It would be very easy to slip into thinking you might be something really, really special.
I have existed from the morning of the world, and I shall exist until the last star falls from the night. Although I have taken the form of Caius Caligula, I am all men as I am no man, and therefore I am a god.
Did Caligula think he was a god? He may have done, but again, at the end of the day, he was assassinated, so in reality, he wasn't. Next question, who's our next bad emperor? Now Nero again suffers from bad PR from later contemporary authors. Did Nero kill his own mother? So his mother was Agrippina the Younger, who was one of his greatest supporters, secured him in power, etc. However, once the emperor wanted to exercise authority in his own right.
Let me pass.
The Emperor forbids you to approach him. You must leave the palace today and are forbidden to enter it again unless summoned by the Emperor. Guards.
Eventually fell out with his mother and had her murdered. The answer there is yes. Next question. I can see where this is going. Did Nero kill his own wife? His wife was called Poppaea, and the contemporary authors describe various ways in which he killed his wife. The most common narrative is that he kicked her in the stomach while she was heavily pregnant, and then she died from that event. Whether that was true or not, whether he killed his wife or not, I'm not so sure. Next question. The pattern continues. Did Nero castrate a boy and make him his new wife? Well, he had a slave boy called Sporus, and when he was touring Greece after the death of Poppaea, he had the slave boy castrated and then made him his wife. So the answer there is yes. So clearly there's something psychotic going on here.
My voice will reach inside them, take hold of their hearts. And actually, I should get home and work on the song.
Next question. Did Nero rebuild Rome for himself? Rome suffered a major fire during the reign of Nero. It's not unusual in a pre-modern city for major fire events to take place. It had to be rebuilt anyway, especially the important parts of the Roman Forum. Of course, he at this point uses it as an excuse to move off the Palatine Hill, where the imperial palace is, and build his own golden palace. So in that sense, he did rebuild Rome for himself with his palace, but the rest, it got to be rebuilt anyway. Did you get to go to Nero's golden palace in Rome? They've got this virtual reality gig, groups of 30 in one of the atriums, and you put this thing on and suddenly you're in it. And you look down onto the lake where the Colosseum's later built, and it's so realistic. Moving on Did Nero persecute Christians? In the Roman world, you were either in Roman or out barbarian. To be Roman, you had to do two things: pay your taxes and acknowledge the emperor as a god by worshipping in the imperial cult temple. Every Roman forum across the empire had a temple to the imperial cult. All you had to do was tip your hat to say, yeah, I believe the emperor's a god. It's all good. Christians refused to do that because they have their own one God. And it was very easy for them, with these early Christians, to persecute them when the Roman state had the need for someone to blame for a negative event. So after the fire in Rome, Nero and the Roman Senate and the state decided to lay the blame on the Christians, these early Christians. This is a really brutal persecution, though. We get contemporary writers saying that effectively you have Christian candles who are strung up, set on fire outside Nero's palace and throughout Rome. Whether that took place or not, I don't know, but certainly there was a huge Christian persecution after the Neronian fire. Next question. Did Domitian kill his own brother Titus? Well, Domitian was the third of the Flavian emperors. So, year of the four emperors, AD 69, the winner, Vespasian, great Roman general, replaced by his son Titus, who reigns for a short while. The younger son is called Domitian. He gets a very bad press from the contemporary writers because he doesn't stand up to this sort of martial image that the rest of his family had. Did he kill his own brother? I don't think so personally, but he was nowhere near as good an emperor as Vespasian or Titus. Next question. Was Domitian a tyrant? Very interesting question. You could argue that every Roman emperor was a tyrant because effectively they were the ruler of their whole known world with very few checks and balances. When Augustus became the first emperor, 27 BC, Augustus gathered together under his power over a decade or two most of the means of controlling the territory, the administration, the finances, the military of the Roman world, which is by now the Roman Empire. And no Roman emperor from that point would give that up. Why would you give it up? Domitian in that sense would have been a tyrant, but then again, every other Roman emperor was a tyrant as well. Next question. Commodus. Did Commodus kill his father, the mad, bad Commodus, played by Joaquin Phoenix, as famously psychotic in the movie Gladiator?
I would put to the whole world if you would only love me.
Did he kill his father? There's no evidence of it. Do I think he could have killed his father? Probably. I wouldn't put it past Commodus, but I don't think there's any hard evidence for it. Next question. Did Commodus have an affair with his sister? This shows the power of Hollywood. In the movie Gladiator, there's a hint that Commodus is having an affair with his sister Lucilla.
Am I not merciful? Am I not merciful?
Did that happen in reality? No evidence whatsoever. Next question. Did Commodus kill his sister? It's worth remembering that when Marcus Aurelius died, Commodus' father, he appointed 40 senatorial mentors to keep Commodus on track because he realised he was a wrong 'un. By the end of Commodus' reign, when he's assassinated in 193, only one of the 40 is alive. Early in this period of Roman history at the top of society, Lucilla realises that actually there's a real problem with Commodus, so she's part of a plot. The plot fails and she's executed. So did Commodus kill his sister? Yes. Did Commodus think he was Hercules? There's evidence that Commodus starts dressing in public as Hercules the demigod and starts asking people to call him Hercules, and indeed turns the statue of Sol outside the Colosseum, which is over 30 metres high. Originally, the statue of Nero turned into the god Sol. He turns it into a statue of himself as Hercules, and even goes into the arena dressed as Hercules. So did Commodus think he was Hercules? Possibly. Next question. Did Commodus fight in the arena? Commodus became obsessed with the arena. The interesting thing, of course, was the people, the gladiators were drugged, the beasts were also drugged. He knew that. He didn't think the people knew that. Everybody knew that, and he became a laughingstock. Next question. Did Commodus dissolve the Senate? as his reign progressed and he became increasingly psychotic, most senators were absolutely terrified of him. Cassius Dio, the great Roman historian, who was a contemporary and he was a senator, he tells a story about one day Commodus was hunting beasts in the arena, including shooting the heads off ostriches in the Colosseum using sickle-shaped arrows. All the senators are sat around the front row of the Colosseum where all the rich people sit, and Commodus picks up one of the ostrich heads, walks across to where Cassius Dio and his fellow senators are sitting, and looks at them with the ostrich head and goes, "This is what's going to happen to you if you don't behave." And because he's so psychotic, all the senators have to pretend to laugh. Next question. Did Commodus rename Rome after himself? Commodus renamed everything after himself. All the branches of the Roman military, the months of the year. He renamed Rome itself after himself. Talk about letting things go to your head. Later in life, he was beginning to suffer psychologically. He was executing more and more and more people, which is why eventually he's assassinated in AD 193, which began the year of the 5 emperors. Next question. Did Caracalla kill his brother? So we're moving on to a new dynasty. This is the Severan dynasty. The founder is Septimius Severus, who becomes the emperor in AD 193 at the end of the year of the 5 emperors. And his 2 sons are Caracalla and Geta, elder and younger. Severus is a warrior emperor who spends his entire reign out on campaign fighting. Famously came to power at the point of a sword and never forgot it. Told the sons Caracalla and Geta on his deathbed in York in February AD 211 to love each other, look after each other, look after the military, and ignore everybody else. But Caracalla and Geta hated each other, really hated each other. So as soon as Severus was dead, they fled back to Rome at full speed and separately to try and secure power themselves, which his father had wanted them to share. And by the end of the year 211, Caracalla had had his brother Geta murdered, who died bleeding out in his mother's arms in the imperial palace on the Palatine Hill. Did Caracalla kill his brother? Yes. Next question. Did Caracalla destroy Alexandria? So Alexandria is the capital of the Roman province of Egypt, which is one of the great imperial provinces. Famously, Caracalla has no self-depreciating sense of humour. And as he arrives in Alexandria, he hears that there's been a play performed in a theatre in Alexandria, making fun of him killing his younger brother Geta earlier in his reign. So when the delegation arrives to welcome him to Alexandria outside all the worthies, he has them all killed immediately, murdered where they stand. Then he lets his troops loose in Alexandria and they sack it over a period of days, so it causes huge amounts of damage. However, it doesn't destroy Alexandria because the city continues to function as the capital of Roman Egypt and lasts for centuries longer as a major city in Egypt. Next question. Did Caracalla make everyone a Roman citizen? Before his reign, to be a citizen of Rome, you had to live in Italy. If you lived in the empire and were free, but outside Italy, you were called a peregrini. You more or less had the same rights as a citizen of Rome, but you were a provincial citizen, not a Roman citizen. Caracalla in 212 needed a big PR win. He'd taken over from a very successful Roman emperor, Septimius Severus. He then had his brother murdered. All of Roman society knew this, so he decided to make all Roman citizens equal, whether they were in Italy or outside. Peregrini from that point also became Roman citizens. So yes, he did, but the reason was he needed a really big PR win. Next question. Who was Maximinus Thrax? Giant of a man. He was a giant of a warrior emperor when he became the emperor, but he's also the emperor who brought down the Severan dynasty. So in AD 235, you run through all of the Severan emperors: Septimius Severus, Caracalla and Geta, Caracalla, Macrinas, Elagabalus. You went with Alexander Severus, who's a boy when he becomes the emperor. Alexander Severus, in a dynasty of warrior emperors, is a failure because he doesn't succeed in conflict with the Persians on the eastern frontier. He doesn't succeed in conflict with the Germans north of the Rhine, and eventually he's assassinated in AD 235 on the orders of Maximinus Thrax. That brings to an end the Severan dynasty, and he becomes the first emperor in what we now call the crisis of the 3rd century. Did Maximinus Thrax nearly destroy the Roman Empire? The period between the crisis of the 3rd century, which runs from 235 to 284 AD, the Roman Empire nearly completely implodes. You have plagues, You have internal civil wars. You have usurpations. You have the Romans losing conflict on the eastern frontier. You have Germans invading over the Rhine and Danube. Everything goes wrong. The emperor who initiates it through the assassination of Alexander Severus is Maximinus Thrax. So the answer is, for that period, he initiated it, yes. Next question. Who was the worst Roman emperor? Well, we've covered two of the candidates already. Domitian. I think Domitian was a very poor Roman emperor because of the foreign policy decisions he made. At the beginning of his reign, the great warrior governor Agricola could claim that the whole main island of Britain had been conquered, which no Roman before or since was able to claim. However, Domitian was more interested in his own military success on the Danube and ordered Agricola to return back south. The Romans never fully conquered the far north again. It's also Domitian, by the way, who refused to allow Agricola to invade Ireland. If the Romans had conquered Ireland, that may also become part of the province of Britannia. So here we have the modern political settlement of the British Isles effectively set in place in the late 1st century AD by the last Flavian emperor. Clearly the mad, bad Commodus, I think he was a terrible emperor. One of the things he did, by the way, was bankrupt the Roman imperial treasury, the fiscus. That's one of the reasons why you have this cascade of emperors in the year of the 5 emperors in 193, because the various emperors have got no money to pay off the Praetorian Guard. That's why the first of the emperors in that period, Pertinax, was assassinated, because he got no money to pay them. But also for consideration, I want to throw in Honorius. Honorius is the Roman emperor in the West at the beginning of the 5th century AD. It's in his reign you begin to see the decay set in irreparably, which eventually sees the Western Empire cease to exist in AD 476. Examples: civil war in Spain, strife across the Western Empire, an inability to hold the frontiers on the Rhine and the Danube. Crucially, it's in this period that Britain falls officially out of Roman controls. It's in his reign that the rot sets in, from which the Roman Empire in the West never recovers. I really hope you enjoyed me answering questions from Google there on the worst Roman emperors. Go to all History Hit content to find other fabulousness about the Roman world and history more broadly.